Lawyers across the country are protesting the Trump administration today. They are retaking their oaths and rallying against the recent threats and public attacks against judges and law firms. Let's bring in CBS News justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane with more details on this. Scott, what's behind today's rallies and protests?
Hard to believe it's already May, but it is May 1st, which means it's May Day, which is a common day for protests in communities across the country. But there's something quite different happening this year. There are at courthouses and city halls across the country, from Los Angeles to Philadelphia to Houston, Seattle, Minneapolis, New York, protests or rallies staged today outside of courthouses from lawyers, in some cases retired judges, taking their oaths again, kind of like renewing your wedding vows, going out to the courthouse steps, taking your oath to show devotion to the U.S. Constitution at this particularly toxic moment when judges, law firms, and attorneys are being vitriolically criticized for their cases at a moment when so much of our politics has consumed the legal sphere. There's also one at the U.S. Supreme Court underway as the afternoon begins that includes some number of political figures, but it's happening on the Supreme Court steps as lawyers take their oaths again, trying to reassure themselves and reassure the public that they remain devoted not to a specific client or political figure, but to the Constitution itself.
And Scott, you have some new reporting involving a former Trump administration official who just had his global entry access revoked. First of all, remind our viewers what that is, global entry access, and what have you learned about this?
And the global entry access is a system set up to help some people get easier access in and out of the country through international travel, kind of like an expedited system for those who are trusted and pass background checks and go through the system. That has been stripped from a man named Chris Krebs, who may not be a household name, but in Washington he sure is a high-profile name. During the Trump administration, the first one, he was in charge of an agency called CISA, which is Cybersecurity and Information Systems, really helps the baseline infrastructure of the U.S. cyber world. Chris Krebs in 2020 attested that the 2020 election was righteously executed, it was legitimate, it was not rigged, it was not vulnerable to widespread fraud. He has been on the target list for Donald Trump ever since, and recently the Trump administration and the president announced an executive order which put Chris Krebs under scrutiny. And it was learned by CBS News, confirmed today, that Chris Krebs has been removed from the global entry system, no longer has access to that travel permission and structure. And a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson said it's because Chris Krebs is subject to a law enforcement investigation. We're awaiting comment from Chris Krebs, but you can just sense here what Trump critics have been saying, that just taking those types of administrative actions against those the president deems enemies has a chilling effect on others from speaking truth to power.
It's a very interesting story. We're going to keep following that. And Scott, I want to switch gears here for a moment. There's a face-off going on in a Virginia federal courtroom right now. It's expected to start momentarily. And it's all over a Georgetown University fellow who was detained and then set for deportation. So what is the judge in this case being asked to decide?
A lot of different issues here in this very high-profile deportation case of a man named Bedar Suri. He's from Virginia, but he was a Georgetown University fellow and a relatively high-profile figure on the campus at Georgetown University here in Washington. The Trump administration is trying to argue to a judge today that they should be able to continue forward with a deportation of Suri to get him out of the country. He was arrested by agents with masks and without noticeable badges, according to the videos, in mid-March. He's been transferred to the South, to Louisiana and Texas, to queue him up for deportation. His attorneys are trying to get the case moved back to Virginia and ultimately to get him released, arguing that the Trump administration is making false claims. Suri is tied to pro-Hamas efforts. But we'll see here another one of those face-offs between the administration and somebody who believes they've been wrongly accused as to the power to deport in this administration. They've been pushing boundaries on deportations with or without due process. Here's another front, and this time the person has particular notoriety in his home area.
And speaking of making those deportations without due process, Scott, we understand there's news out of Texas on the Trump administration's deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. What's happening there?
That 18th century emergency wartime power to expedite deportations without due process. Another loss in court by the Trump administration over using the Alien Enemies Act. The judge in Brownsville, Texas, appointed by President Trump during the first term, has ruled the effort to deport a handful of would-be deportees is illegal, that it is an overreach by the administration to declare this a wartime and to try to deport people under a wartime power. Those people could still be deported through traditional means, the judge says, but not through the Alien Enemies Act. All of this feels like it's on a trajectory back to the U.S. Supreme Court, but now the number of losses the Trump administration is suffering in courts over this is adding up.
Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much. Always great to be with you.